The dissection chamber smelled like antiseptic and warm copper. Not that Elena Brooks could smell anything through the sedatives. They'd numbed her senses, or tried to. Her vision swam as a sterile light hovered overhead, buzzing faintly, indifferent to her waking grogginess. Metal restraints clicked softly around her wrists and ankles, and something that felt like warm plastic hugged her temples. To the aliens watching behind the reinforced bioglass, she was Specimen 43. Female, Earth native. Mid-30s. No formal military training, but physiologically unremarkable, except for that damn noise. She was laughing. Not loud, not manic. A low, rasping chuckle that bubbled up between slow breaths like a faulty engine refusing to stall. The noise had started 12 seconds after she regained consciousness. At first, the observers assumed neural trauma, then that it was a defense mechanism. By the third minute, they were taking notes. Does she understand her situation? One of the observers clicked in guttural tones, its throat sacs fluttering with uncertainty. She's aware, said the lead xenopsychologist, consulting her vitals. Heart rate controlled. Neural activity indicates cognition. Possibly mockery. The aliens did not like mockery. A tall, sinewy technician moved forward, pressing a node on the console. A thin arc of electric blue energy surged through the restraint grid. It wasn't enough to kill, just enough to sear nerve endings. Elena arched her back with a sharp inhale. Then, again, that chuckle. She turned her head slightly toward the camera and whispered, "You guys always start with pain? No foreplay." The technician recoiled from the monitor. The lead scientist's crest flushed pale. She should be screaming. Elena wasn't. She was smiling. They'd taken her from a burned-out refugee compound outside what used to be Portland, right after the last orbital strike. She remembered the buzzing lights, the metallic taste, the moment her feet left the ground and gravity betrayed her. Then a bright pop, nothing, and now this. They'd expected terror, tears, pleas. She gave them sarcasm. On Earth, pain had been a constant. The kind that didn't scream. It simmered. It gnawed. She had splinted broken arms with duct tape, cauterized wounds with car lighters, watched friends bleed out with bombs still falling. EMTs don't get to fall apart. They patch others while they're breaking. The chamber hissed open, releasing an acidic mist. A new creature entered, taller, armored, likely command class. It stood before Elena, unblinking, and spoke through a translator. "You are in our custody. You will provide data. Resistance is futile." "Big words," she said, tilting her head. "Let me guess, your species thinks we're primitive? Aggressive? Fragile?" The alien ignored her tone. "You are to comply with physiological response testing. This is standard." "You abducted the wrong woman." There was a pause. Perhaps the translator stumbled. Then it raised one clawed digit. Pain lanced through her skull like a spear of molten glass. She convulsed. The electrodes at her temples flared white-hot. Her teeth grit, eyes fluttered. A rivulet of blood slid down one nostril. The alien leaned closer, watching, studying. Her lips twitched. The laughter came again, hoarser this time. But not broken. Not mad. "You really don't get it, do you?" she wheezed. "You can't scare someone who's already lived through hell." The alien drew back. Not from the laughter itself, but from the implications. The emotional resilience. The sheer unpredictability. Their databases had warned of human irrationality under duress. But this was something else. Behind the glass, the scientist clicked his mandibles anxiously. "Begin phase 2, he said to no one in particular. "Before she infects the others." The chamber resealed with a hiss. Elena let her head fall back against the steel slab, breath slowing. The pain hadn't stopped. Her muscles twitched in aftershock, her skin burned. But the laugh lingered, fading into a quiet hum. This wasn't bravado. It wasn't even defiance. It was habit. When you live among corpses and cratered cities, you either go numb, or you learn to laugh. Elena had chosen the second path a long time ago. And now, locked in the bowels of an alien ship, being prodded and zapped like a lab rat, She had just one thought circling in her mind. They had no idea what they'd brought on board, and she couldn't wait to watch them figure it out. The alien scientist's mandibles clicked in erratic rhythm as he reviewed the footage again. 12 rotations of observation, 6 failed interrogations, and one increasingly unsettling constant. Specimen 43 laughed. Not always audibly, but always there. In her expression. In the tension of her posture. In the way she looked directly into the lens, as if she knew they were watching and pitied them. "She is not breaking," muttered Director Vectel, voice filtered through trembling translator nodes. Pain thresholds exceeded predictive limits. She should have deteriorated. Across the lab chamber, a junior linguist from the 9th cluster tugged at his restraints. "She talks to the cameras when no one's there. She told me a joke yesterday. I still think about it." His voice wavered. Vectel turned his gaze toward the linguist. "You were not authorized to initiate conversation." I didn't." She started it. His eyes were dilated, body slick with stress secretion. "She asked me how many tentacles it takes to screw in a light bulb, and then laughed like she'd swallowed static." A beat. "Sir, it's in my dreams now." Vectel issued a command. The linguist was removed for psych evaluation. Inside the testing chamber, Elena waited. Her wrists were raw, the restraints tighter now. But she sat straight, humming a tune under her breath. It was something old pre-war Earth. Something bright and cheery that didn't belong here. That's why she sang it. Today they'd sent in a telepath. A proud species, multi-limbed, iridescent, with neural appendages that pulsed like jellyfish stingers. Elena had blinked up at it and smiled. "You gonna read my mind or braid it?" The telepath had lasted 17 seconds. It collapsed mid-link, screaming, thrashing, then silence. Not unconscious, catatonic. They'd wheeled it out on a floating slab, eyes frozen open, its limbs twitching to a rhythm no one else could hear. The incident report logged a single phrase extracted before failure. "She wants the pain. She breathes it." They brought in a pain suppressor next, a heavy rig designed to dull the spinal cord's response and mute reaction entirely. Elena laughed while they attached it. "You think the screaming is the problem? Oh, sweetie, you haven't figured it out yet." The suppressor overloaded. Vectel stood at the observation bay, staring at her. "What is she?" he asked aloud, though no one dared answer. She was human, but the humans in the manuals cried. They panicked. They obeyed. This one thrived. In his quarters, he reviewed her data again. Civilian. Earthborn. No enhancements. No military training. But buried in the notes was a record from a field camp hospital. Volunteer medic. Survived 3 orbital bombings. Had once kept a child alive by amputating her own crushed hand to free him. No anesthesia. No help. A survivor. A builder of scar tissue. Elena, meanwhile, was watching them back. Cameras didn't intimidate her. She saw them for what they were. Windows into their fear. They didn't understand what she'd come from. Pain wasn't new. Pain was a roommate. Fear was the air she'd breathed since the sky turned orange. One of the guards, young, rigid-spined, trying hard not to look at her, entered to swap her nutrient pack. She looked at him and whispered, "Did you hear the one about the alien who thought pain would make humans talk?" He paused. She tilted her head. They didn't find his body. The guard dropped the vial. Outside, in the command suite, arguments flared. "She's destabilizing containment morale. She's not a specimen anymore. She's contagion. We should void the chamber. Vent her into the black. And risk whatever she is spreading? What if the others already caught it?" Laughter is not an emotion we understand. "It's not an emotion," Vectel said quietly. "It's a weapon." The ship's ambient temperature dropped. No one had adjusted it. Lights flickered. Unrelated, they claimed. Power grids stabilized seconds later. In the med bay, a corpse was discovered. Another technician. Self-terminated. Final logs showed him watching footage of Elena on loop, mumbling, "It's funny. It's so funny." His mandibles had been torn off. By his own hands. They tried sleep suppressants. Mind foggers. Sensory deprivation. Nothing worked. Anyone spending more than a few minutes observing Elena came away altered. And through it all, she remained. Still strapped. Still bleeding from the joints. Still smiling like she knew something they didn't. In truth, she did. Pain was never just about sensation, it was about power. And power could flip if you chose to wear the pain instead of fear it. If you looked your torturer in the eyes and laughed, you stole control. Elena had nothing left to lose. That made her terrifying. That made her free. And as she sat in that chair, singing softly and counting down under her breath, Bechtel finally understood. They had brought something aboard they could not unlearn. A creature that turned torment into punchlines. A woman who refused to give them what they craved. Submission. In her silence there was violence. In her laughter, contagion. And somewhere, beneath the hum of failing lights and creaking hull, was a sound that did not belong. A slow, rising chuckle. Not hers. One of them. The ship was dying. Not in any catastrophic sense. No fires, no hull breaches, but in the quiet, insidious way that systems die when their operators forget how to breathe. Lights dimmed without command. Autolocks disengaged at random. Communications repeated fragments of nonsensical code, mostly laughter loops, garbled and layered until the engineers pulled their own comms out of their earholes. Director Bechtel hadn't slept in 3 cycles. He sat hunched in the command throne, skin pallid, breath raspy. In one trembling hand, he held a report. 6 more personnel declared unfit for duty. 1 dead. 2 simply missing. The rest transferred themselves to containment voluntarily, claiming they no longer trusted their own minds. He looked up at the surveillance feed. The human was still in her restraints, still humming, still bleeding. Her smile hadn't faded. Not once. "She hasn't moved in 2 days," said a subordinate, voice hushed. "And yet the infection spreads." "She doesn't need to move," Bechtel whispered. "She's already everywhere." Specimen 43 had never escaped her cell, yet somehow her presence had metastasized through the vessel. No firewall could block it. No neural suppressant could erase it. Laughter had become a contaminant. At first, they thought it was mass hysteria. Then they realized it was strategy. Inside the chamber, Elena slowly turned her head toward the nearest lens. She spoke, though no microphone was on. "Are we having fun yet?" Her lips were split, dried blood caked at the edges, but her eyes gleamed with something that had no translation in their lexicon. It wasn't rage or defiance. It was intent. When the environmental systems failed next, it wasn't oxygen that was affected. It was light. The ship's corridors were cast in endless twilight, shadows stretching into shapes that didn't match their sources. Multiple officers reported hearing someone whispering jokes in languages they'd never learned. Elena hadn't left the room. She didn't need to. One by one, the crew stopped resisting. Not because they believed they were safe, but because they stopped believing in anything at all. Some wandered the halls laughing softly to themselves, reciting Earth idioms with butchered syntax. Others refused to speak, huddled in supply closets, fingers jammed in their ears. And through it all, she remained restrained. Until she wasn't. The doors to her chamber slid open not with force, but invitation. The locking clamps unlatched. No alarms. No commands. Just quiet submission. Elena stood. Her joints cracked. Her muscles trembled with effort. She took one step. Then another. The hallway was empty. Not silent. Soft chuckles echoed faintly, but empty of resistance. A sentry drone drifted by, scanning her form. It beeped once, whirred, and retreated. The ship's AI, once rigid in its logic matrices, now rerouted her path with deference. Lights flicked on before her like a red carpet, guiding her deeper into the heart of the ship. Toward the command deck. Bechtel saw her coming. He stood alone, the last officer still clinging to the shape of command. His hands trembled on the console. Security footage flickered between static and clips of her smiling. "You are a disease," he said aloud, as she stepped into the chamber. "No," Elena replied softly. "I'm the cure." He raised a weapon. It didn't fire. Of course it didn't. The ship liked her now. She stepped forward, slowly, until they were only a meter apart. "Why?" he rasped. "Why laugh?" She studied him like a tired parent confronting a tantruming child. "Because I remember what it feels like to cry and still keep moving. Because on Earth, pain was breakfast. Laughter was the only weapon we had left. You've destroyed us." "No," she said, reaching past him toward the console. "I let you destroy yourselves. I just sped up the punchline." She keyed in a command. The ship's self-destruct protocol chirped to life. No resistance, no overrides. The AI chuckled. "Finally. Something interesting," it said in a garbled voice. Vectal crumpled. Elena stepped over him and moved to the escape pod bay. One pod waited, sealed and clean. She stepped inside, laid down, and closed her eyes. Behind her, the ship began to count down. She didn't look back. The last thing recorded by external sensors was the launch of a single pod, followed by a rising chorus, distorted, layered, howling with mirth, until the ship vanished in a star-bright bloom. Later, salvagers would find fragments. Inside a scorched black box, one final message blinked in red across cracked screens. She laughed. "We didn't."